Hi, good morning, everybody. Shkach to those who to help give shir, Revis and Levi Khan. Shkach to them. So we got to the Mishnah on top of Mem Aleph about Aleph. So Gemara turns actually sort of to a different direction. Ha'omer Pitisi Esbito Shel Ploni. Person says, I seduced the daughter of so-and-so. Now, normally there's a penalty. She's sort of a willing participant after she was seduced. So, Mishalim Baishas Ubegam, he's obligated to go ahead and pay the embarrassment and the lowering of her value. However, Al Piatzmo, so that he pays on his own admission. If he was one, in other words, there wasn't witnesses that brought him to court and accused him of it, but rather he himself. However, he does not pay a kanas. He does not pay the penalty, right? There was like a 50 shkalim fine, right? Now, this fine is not necessarily compensation because it's flat, right? If it's the same for everybody, obviously it's not compensation because not every person is different. So when it comes to the degradation or the embarrassment, so each person is different, right? Somebody who came from a very prestigious family, right? There'd be more damages. But over here, since the knas is right universal, therefore it's considered to be a penalty, a knas, and because everyone's the same, and therefore one does not pay knas al piatzmo. It's only if a person caused damages by his own admission, he doesn't. So a person says, I stole something. So normally you steal something, you have to go ahead and pay back double. So he pays back the principal, but he doesn't pay back the double payment. Why? Because the kefil, the double payment, if he stole $100, he has to pay back $200. He only if he admits it, and that's how he got caught, he only pays $100. Why? Because that second $100 is not compensation. The person who was stolen from only lost $100. So the $200, right? The second $100 of it is considered to be a penalty. And once again, ein mishalim knas al piatzmo. He doesn't pay knas. And also if he stole it and slaughtered it and sold it, right? So those cases where he pays 4 or 5 times the animal, right, his sheep or cow, he would not pay that. He would just pay the principal as to the value of the animal to make the damage full. Hamis shari is ploni, ushara shaploni. A person says, my ox killed so-and-so, right, where he's obligated to go ahead and pay for the person for the value. Oh, shara shaploni, or his animal gored another animal. He goes and he pays. At this point, he pays al piatzmo because that's considered to be damages, right? So the kofar, that one pays, is damages for the person's life, right? Kofar is the payment that's done when an animal kills a person. The person says, my animal killed the ox of so-and-so. Excuse me. Sorry. My ox killed the Eved, the servant of so-and-so, his Eved Kanani. He doesn't pay because that has a flat fee of 30 shekels. And since it's a flat fee, as we just saw earlier, flat fees are considered to be a kanasa penalty. And therefore, Zakla, here's the rule. If he has to go ahead and pay more than the damages, he doesn't pay for himself. So any amount that's over the compensation is not paid upon one's admission. Now, obviously, one would be obligated if 2 witnesses came to court that testified, hey, he did this damage or his animal did this damage, he would pay the usual. We're just talking about where he himself comes to Beis Din and says, hey, I want to do tshuva.
Obviously, the issue here is great friends, 2 guys are coming. Russ Beis Din to beat them to it, so therefore he could get out of.
Yeah, he would be smart. Right? So it pays if you're going to be a thief and a bad person to be a Talmid Chacham, right? Sure.
Pays to be
No,
a thief.
Yeah.
It's different as a thief.
I mean, you see, many times, a lot of people who do white-collar crimes, oftentimes they're, guys who are familiar with all the laws and they just try and do everything to, get around it. Zok the Gemara. So the Mishnah says, Pitisi as biti, I seduce someone's daughter. I lisni anasti. Why don't you say you violated her against her will? So where answers let me boy Kamar. So he wants to give a bigger chiddush. Let me boy, not only a case of a nasty, when he violated a girl, in other words, against her will, Deloika pagim la. In other words, over there, he's really not saying anything bad about her. She's a complete victim in the matter. In such a case, the Mishalim Baishas is begam al piyasa, then he can pay her. But if he says, that he seduced her, in other words, that basically there is some guilt with her, right? She was a willing participant,
Complicity.
right? Ema lo Mishalim piyasa. So maybe he shouldn't, be believed and therefore obligated to pay, because basically what he's saying is, I'm a bad person, but she was a willing participant. So Kamash Malon, Masnisen, Kamash Malon, therefore we see here that no, he is Naaman, even though there is some sort of guilt by her, right? Because she was a willing participant at some level. Nevertheless, he is believed, he's Naaman, he's obligated to go ahead and pay Bosha Supagam. And our Masnisen, Delaki Agam, does not Delaki Atara. Does not leave his mission. The time of the advice to the Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, Imam Shimon Rabbi Shimon. In the case of seduction, he does not go ahead and pay that. Why? Because he doesn't have the right to go ahead and basically ruin her name by saying that she was seduced and it's at some level a willing participant. What if she's okay with it? Okay, fine. Let's get some money. But okay, fine. Sounds willing participant. Big deal. Let me take the money. So, but it's not good for her father. Her father is not happy with it. So therefore, even though she might be happy with it, her father doesn't want bad rumors to be about his daughter. So okay, let's say her father was good with it. Right? Okay, I'll take the money. So but delay so nichale ladida my so no demaloi nichale liavia so nichale liavia my the demaloi nichalu lubrei mishpacha. It's not good for the other family members, uncles or whatever, siblings. Right, siblings like shidduchim, and it's going to hurt their chances. So nichale liavia mishpacha. Okay, everyone's good with it. My so yefshad like a chab mediyasiyah delay nichale. Right, it's impossible that in the entire extended family there is not somebody who. It's not possible. Everyone is good with the fact that she was violated. It doesn't bother them, and therefore, in this case, that since it brings degradation to her or her father or her family, then he's ein on them, and he doesn't have the power to believe, according to Rabbi Shimon, which is not like our Mishnah.
Degradation even with a nasty as opposed to just petite.
Right, because even though she was raped, right, it was completely against her will. She's a complete victim in the matter.
Right, I'm saying
so that there is no boshus on the family. So that there, according to Rabbi Shimon, right, that would.
So it's only petite where he disagrees with their Mishnah.
Right, and therefore our Mishnah was a chiddush, and our Mishnah, basically came to teach not like Rabbi Shimon. Fine. Then we say ha'emer ganafti misham sakeren. When he says he stole, he doesn't go ahead. He only pays for the principal. Same thing if he slaughtered it and sold it, he's 4 or 5 times, only pays the principal. And then we said the case of the animal. Now, Itmar, Palga Nizka. Now, what's Palga Nizka? Chatzi Nezek. Now, what is Chatzi Nezek? If my animal gores another animal, right? I have an ox and it gores another animal, so that's sort of an unusual behavior of an animal, right? Animals don't always gore, right? But it does do it at a time, right? It's sort of like a shark attacks, right? They always tell you, sharks don't attack. Well, yeah, but they do sometimes, right? So now, this payment, right, of chatzi nezek. So you pay, my animal damages someone's animal. Their animal is worth $150, okay? So I have to pay $75. That's called palga nezek, or we refer to it as chatzi nezek. Samara papa palga niska mamayna. That is a compensatory payment. Right, you're paying for the value, and then you pay for half of it, $75. And Rav Huna bar Yeshua Amar Palga Nizka Knas. It's a knas, right? It's a penalty. It's not a compensation. Rather, it's more of a penalty. Rav Papa Amar Palga Nizka. He says it's half, and I was like, why is that? Palga Nizka Mamayna Why Ksaver Stam Sharem La Bechesas Shimor. Most animals, your typical ox, is not considered to be guarded. Right? It's not considered to be guarded. In other words, it requires me to guard it. It's not guarded on its own, right? If I have a pet chipmunk, right? I don't know, I'm trying to think of an animal that doesn't cause damage, right? So a hamster doesn't cause damage, right? I don't know, choose good things, I don't know, right? But it doesn't require watching, so I can let it run around. It's not going to cause damage. but so he says an ox, right? Right? It's not considered to be guarded on its own. And therefore, I should really keep it guarded in a fenced area, not let it go out. And if it does go out, then that's my fault. I should pay the whole thing. But however, the Torah has a little rachmanis in the person because it's not a known behavior of this specific animal. And since it's not a known behavior of this specific animal, therefore, I'm not like fully responsible for paying the compensation. Therefore, I'll pay half. Rav Huna bar Yeshua Amar Palga Niska. No, half a nezek is what? Knasu. It's a knas. Ksaver stam shar b'ches shimor. Most ox are considered to be timid animals, and they don't gore. I don't need to lock it up. They can roam around my front yard, right? Uvadinu delay l'shalim klal, and I shouldn't pay at all, right? Because it wasn't my fault. It was unusual behavior. However, Rachmanahu the concept, right? However, the Torah penalized the person. Oh, it's a kanas. It penalized the person. That he should watch his animal. All right. So therefore, if you hold the animal is basically a wild animal, needs to be guarded, and then it gores another animal, kills or whatever, I have to pay chatzi nezek. So that is considered to be mamona. If you hold that, really it's considered to be guarded, but the Torah says, you got to keep your animals guarded, and therefore, even though, right, it's sort of guarded, but you still should watch it. So that's considered to be a kanasa penalty, and therefore you have to pay. Now, let's bring this back to our Mishnah, because Tanan, well, actually, we'll go for another case first. Hanizak v'hamazik b'tashlumin.
Mm-hmm.
When one who gets damaged, so there's a damager and a damagee, they're both involved with payment. In other words, they both pay. Right? The damager and the damagee both pay. So I understand if you say they both end up paying. So if you hold that when the person pays chatzi nezek, that you're paying for damages. So since he's only paying for damages, so therefore, in our case before, $75 is coming out of the damagee's account, right? Because he had an animal that was worth $150, and he's only getting paid $75. So in the end, it's costing him $75, and it cost the damager $75. So I know the shaykh nazik, but tashlumin, therefore the needs of the tashlumin. Therefore, we see the person's damaged. He has a payment. But if you hold the person who's the damagee, right, is only paid the $75 because it's a penalty on the damager. Right? But the money that he's getting is not compensation, it's not tashlumin, right? He just had bad luck because the animal got gored by an animal. Mm-hmm. So really, you should get nothing, right? So, but he's getting $75 free. So he's not really in tashlumin, he's not really making a payment because he just had bad luck that his animal got gored, right? But at least he's getting $75. So he's not really having a compensation. There's no loss of money to him. He did lose it, right? But that loss wasn't like he's paying for it. That was almost like bad luck, like bad mazel, because something happened to it that person wouldn't have been responsible for, right? If an onus happened and broke his something, so there's no real like payment that he makes. He just has bad luck. But over here, it's saying it's like he has some sort of payment, that he's responsible for. So when it says lo, so now we're talking about when an animal gets gored, right? So in addition to the damage, so let's say the animal's worth $150, okay? But the carcass or the hide is worth, let's say $30 afterwards, right? So his real damage, he had an animal worth $150, and now it's reduced to $30. So really, it's a loss of $120, right? So the chatzi nezek, right, is really only $60 that he gets paid. So, but let's say the animal gets gored, that's worth $30. But as time goes on until they go to court, right, there are the COVID laws in the city, the Beis Din doesn't meet as often, right? And by the time they get to go to court, this carcass is no longer worth $30. It's worth $10. All right. So who gets that loss? At the time when he damaged it, right? It was okay. You had $120 loss, and the guy say, "Come to court." He's like, "What do you mean? It's $140 loss, right?" So we say that loss, that $20, the devaluing of the carcass, of the hide, that is on the damagee. That's his tashlumin. All right. Elafach is the Gemara says Pinchas Nevela Tanina. We actually learned something else. Tashlumi nezek, the payments of nezek. Malamed shabalim etaplim b'nevei. So the owners, right, the damagee, the nizak, right, he's the one who deals with the carcass. So meaning it's his loss. So since he didn't give it from day one, he didn't sell on day one. It was worth $30, and he waited a month, and he sold it for $10. So that loss of 20 is on him. That's not something you can go ahead and collect from, right? Unless you have like Chubb insurance or something like that, right? So that's nothing you can go ahead and collect from. So why do we need our case to say that he's, that the nizak is about the tashlum? And we really actually learn from this other brisa. So it said, no, one case comes to teach you that if he gets damaged and it was done by a short time, that the owner, right, that bears the loss of the carcass, and the other one is the case of when a shor muad does it. And why do we need both cases? It's tzricha, diashmin and tam. If we just had that he's the one who carries the full loss of the devaluation, if that's such a word, of the hide, because the shore, the animal that gored his animal that killed it was not shor muad. So therefore, right, it wasn't really the other guy's fault. So since it wasn't really the other guy's fault, the owner he's the one who loses the value of the hide, of muad, but maybe a guy has an animal that's gored 3 times and he should have watched it, right? Aim alone. Maybe in that case, I would say that since this guy has a goring animal, he should pay any and all expenses, including the devaluation of the hide. But we don't say that. We said it's always on the nizak because he's involved in tashlum. And if we only said that the owner, the nizak, he's the one who basically bears the entire loss of the devaluing of the hide, right? Because in that case, right, in a muad, right, because he's getting paid for the whole thing. You're getting 100, whatever, you're getting the full value, and therefore, if it goes down, it's on you. You got most of it. Be happy. Of all time, right? That's basically your your insurance. What's it called? Your deductible, right? Your deductible is with the loss of all time. But if you're only getting paid half of it, Amalo, maybe I would say, since he's only getting paid half, let the damager be responsible for the devaluing of the hide. Amalo, therefore, we have 2 cases. Fine. 3 lines from the bottom. Toshma, come listen. Ma bein tam. Ma bein tam lemuad shetam shalom chatzi nezek megufo. Right? That the tam pays the chatzi nezek migufo. In other words, from the animal. So if my animal, right, my $100 animal gores your $1,000 animal, and I now have to pay chatzi nezek $500, the maximum amount I could pay is my $100. Take my animal. I mean, he caused it. I'm not paying more. It only comes from the damaging animal. But if it is muad, mishalim nezek shalom. But let's say it's a muad. My $100 animal gores your $1,000 animal, and I got to pay you the full amount. So then you take from my assets anything, even from my choicest properties, my choicest stuff, right? You take anything you want that's worth $1,000. But like it doesn't say anything about shatam and doesn't differentiate, right, between paying oneself. Now remember, our mission, we're talking about mishalim al piatzo. You only pay, right, something which is mammon. You don't pay a knas. So you see that over here, right, it doesn't mention ein mishalim al piatzo. It must be that you do mishalim al piatzo. You must pay, right? If your animal does, if you admit that your animal gored, you must be paying it because it doesn't differentiate in this case. And if you must be paying it, that means it's mammon, it's not knas. So my answer is, so it doesn't mention that case. The answer is no Tanakh Shari. It doesn't list all differences between tam and muah. So mashai or the hasher. Okay, so what are the cases? Does that which we say something? The list is not complete. When you say the list is not complete, you can only say it if it's missing more than one thing. But if it's missing only one thing, like being the shalim al piatzmo, that means that the reason why it left off wasn't accidentally left off. It means it's not included in that list. So what else is on there that we can say? Oh, we can say it's not a complete list. The mashar da shares the shire chatzi kofar. when you pay chatzi kofer. Now, kofer is my animal kills somebody. So you got to pay kofer. You got to pay, all right, kofer comes the word kapara, like atonement, right? So you pay atonement, right? You pay for the value of the person's life. So that is a way of getting atonement because your animal killed a person. So if it was a shor tam, which normally pays chatzi nezek, pays half damages. If it kills a person, you pay half of kofer. So if you say chatzi kofer, perhaps we can say that it's not right. It was not something that should have been listed. It wasn't left off the list, because it could have been a list. Rather, it wasn't appropriate for the list. And why is that? Hamani, whose opinion is this? Rabbi Yossi Aglili. It's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. The Amar Tam Neshalim Chatzi Kofer, right? That the Tam does pay Chatzi Kofer. In other words, there's no difference, right? Since it pays just like a Tam pays Chatzi Nezek, so too it pays Chatzi Kofer. So therefore, it's the same thing. It's not a difference between Tam and Muad because the Muad always pays Nezek Shalem, and the Tam always pays Chatzi, right? Yeah. Whether it's Chatzi Kofer or Chatzi Nezek, right? So Tashma, come and listen. Hey, Misharias Ploni. Let's go ahead and take a look at our Mishnah. Hey, Misharias Ploni. If my animal went ahead and killed so and so, Sharias Ploni or his animal, I raised them Shalom Al Piazza, he pays it himself. So my lav the tam is not talking about a tam. So what do you see over here? It says that he pays even when he admits it. So you see, it's a shor tam. It must be mamona. So Gwarens is low, right? Right. So it's low, but muad. No, yes. The reason why he pays mamon al piatzmo is not talking about chatzi nezek. It's not a proof that chatzi nezek is a case of mamon, because only time you pay al piatzmo if it's mamon, not if it's a penalty, right? Rather, if it's damages. So we're talking about a case of muad where he pays the full damages, whether it's of the shore or of the person, and that kufra payment is mamon. But if it's a case of time, what would it be? He wouldn't pay if the short time killed the person. He wouldn't pay at all, right? So at the time he's safe, why does Sefer have to say? So what was the example of a case where he doesn't pay a fine? There's a case of his animal kills an eved. He doesn't have to pay the 30 shkalim, right? Because that's a knas. Don't even bring the case of Abdo. You could bring another example, right, of killing a person, or either he pays or doesn't pay, but muad, where he pays the full kofer of al tam. But if it was a tam, he wouldn't pay for himself because that's considered to be that would be considered to be chatzi, right? Of al tam. So the answer is no. We want to deal all cases of muad. We don't want to differentiate between tam and muad and have one case, and differentiate between that, the tam and muad, between mamon and kanas. Therefore, the case of kanas will bring in a case of kanas when the animal was a muad, and that was even if the animal was a muad, but it killed a slave. That he doesn't pay because the payment of a slave is a kanas and it's not considered to be mamon. So Tashma, come and listen. Zeh Klaus. We said in our Mishnah, Kol Amashalom, yes, Amashahizik in Hashem. If you have to pay more than that which you damaged, then you don't pay it al piatzmo. Then that payment above the value you do not pay. So what do you can see from there? But if it's less than that, let's say chatzi nezek, or if you're not paying the full amount, then he would pay, right? Then he would pay al piatzmos. In other words, even if it was a kanas, but it was less than the value that you killed, right? You should have to pay. So Gemara says, no, don't infer from my Mishnah when it says if the amount you have to pay is more, you don't have to pay because that's a kanas. Right, but if it's less than it did, right? Rather, you should infer from it that if it's more, right, the way you learn for it is not what is. You should learn if it's more, then you don't pay more. Rather, if it's not exact that which you damaged, then you don't pay. So about pachos mai, but if it's less than what? Ein Mashal, you wouldn't pay the al piasmo. So why don't you change the rule in the Mishnah? Because the rule in the Mishnah seems to say that if it's more, you don't pay more than you damaged, right? Which you sort of confer from there. But if it's less, you would pay it. So why didn't the Mishnah just say listi zaklal kol she'eino mashalim kamasha hizik ein mashalim? If the obligation to pay is not exactly that which you damaged, in other words, it's different, either more or less, then you'd pay. Al piazza mashma pachas mashma yaser. Then if that's the case, he's eight mishalim al piazza if it's not identical. But if it's less or more, then you wouldn't pay. So Gemara says, Tiyufta, it's a good kasha. You're right. The Mishnah, the rule of the Mishnah is not clear. The rule of the Mishnah should have indeed said, if your payment is exactly that which you damaged, then you pay. If it's not exactly, whether more or less, then you don't go ahead and pay. The Hilchasa and the halacha is Palga Nizka Knas. Half a nezek is a knas. So the Gemara just says, Tiyufta v'hilchasa, Tiyufta v'hilchasa. You just brought a kasha, basically saying that chatzi nezek is sort of like damages because our Mishnah seemed to imply that anything less you would still pay, right? Because it didn't state the rule properly. So our Mishnah seemed to say that anything less than the full damages is still considered to be compensatory, right? It's mammon, and only more is a kanas. And then now you tell me that the chatzi nezek is not compensatory. Rather, you say the hilchasa paga nizka kanas. So how could you say both? So tiyufta the hilchasa. Gemara says, yes, actually, yeah, that's what it is. Why? In other words, tamamai. So we say tamamai izi. What was the kasha? Mishun delektani kamasha hizi, right? So the big kasha was the big proof to say that chatzi nezek was considering mammon was compensatory is because the rule in the Mishnah didn't state if you pay exactly as your damages, because it's compensatory, then you pay. But if it's more or less, you don't pay. It doesn't imply that less you still pay. So that was the kasha. So lepsikale, it wasn't an exact ruling. It didn't word it properly. But it's not a kasha. It's not a proof the other way. It just means it didn't, it didn't state it properly. So kevan dika chatzi nezek. Why? Because another case, because dika chatzi nezek tzroros. Right? Because what's another case of chatzi nezek, where you would pay half, is tzroros, pebbles, right? Your animal's walking and it kicks pebbles and it breaks something. So that is also one pays chatzi nezek, right? The halach is in that case, my animal's walking and it damages something, let's say hits rocks, right? And it's walking through and it breaks someone's vase, right? So therefore, that is considered to be that is something that you considered to be a payment, right? So there was one second. That is actually compensation, right? That is compensatory, and that's not a fine. It's not a penalty. So therefore, it doesn't say it, a flat out rule, because sometimes you do pay less. And it's considered to be compensatory. What is that? If you basically will go ahead and admit, hey, I was walking with my animals and I kicked some pebbles and I broke this guy's, damaged his car, scratched his car, you leave your phone number. So that is not a kanas that you pay for chatzi nezek. Rather, that's considered to be mammon. And therefore, it couldn't make a flat out rule in our Mishnah that if you ever pay less, it's a kanas. Because in the case of tzroros, it's not a kanas, it's mammon. And now that we say, by the way, that if you ever pay chatzi nezek, it's kanas, right? Such as a case like goring. So hi kalva da'achal imre. If you have a dog that went ahead and ate a sheep, or you have a case of a shnura da'achal tarnagola, or a cat that ate a tarnagola, right? A large rooster. Meshunahu. That is an unusual form of damage, right? Dogs mostly don't eat sheep. Cats don't eat large roosters. And therefore, since one would have to pay there, it's meshuna, right? It's considered to be a knas. It's because it's really more like an onus, it's an accident. And now what she has to pay is more of a knas, right? So since meshuna will even be in Bavel. Therefore, you would not go ahead and collect in Bavel, right? Bavel. The courts in Bavel, they were not mumchim, they were not experts. They didn't have smicha, right? Smichas rabbanim, and therefore they couldn't go out and issue out knas, penalties. They can only issue out damages, but not penalties. And since we say that chatzi nezek is considered to be a knas, this is in the category of knas. Therefore, since it's a category of knas, right? But we have a bubble. You cannot go ahead and collect bazutre. But let's say a cat ate a small little chicken. Then orchehu magvina. Then it's considered to be normal damages, not chatzi nezek, and therefore I collect. Be toughest and if he does, they take it and he doesn't remove it. Excuse me. And if he does go ahead and collect for the damages that were done to him, then we don't remove it. In other words,
He seizes the stuff.
right. Right. The guy who's damaged says, I don't care. Why are you taking it from me? Right. He takes it. Then we don't remove it from him because even though Bavel, they couldn't go ahead and take the knas for him. If he went ahead and took the knas himself, then he won't be able to do it. And if he says, you know what? We're in Bavel, you guys can't do it, but send me up a date over there in Eretz Yisrael. Then Makvina Lei, right? Then we say, go ahead and set him up a court date in Eretz Yisrael for a proper basin to go ahead and penalize the person with the knas. And if not, Azil, if he doesn't want to go there, Mashin Lei, we put him in Cherem. And Bangkok, Mashin Lei, and some say, no, we put him in Cherem anyways for having this animal cause damages. Damrin Lei, Salik Hezekap. Right, you should have removed this, damaging item, right, from your, from your house. You should, right? Where do you know that? From Nasa, the time of Nasa nightmare. A person should have a bad, a damaging dog, a vicious dog in his house who caused damage, or a crooked ladder that people will fall upon. If fall on it, you should throw it away. Pasuk says. You should not place blood in your house. That's something which is potential damage, right? A vicious dog or a broken ladder that people might use to get injured. You should not go ahead and have it. And therefore, if you don't remove it from your house, perhaps you should be in Cherem. So Hajar Lach, Elo, Naros, everybody, Mazel Tov. We'll stop here and Thomas Hashem will continue for the new parish. Everybody.